It's June 1st, 2009, 35,000 feet over the Atlantic. The passengers are asleep, and then the autopilot disconnects. The two pilots in the Air France 447 cockpit have never hand-flown this aircraft in these conditions. They have 4 minutes and 23 seconds before they hit the ocean. They never figure out what is happening. Every time we made flying safer, we made pilots worse at the one thing we still need them for. That thread runs through 4 crashes, one miracle on the Hudson, and a system Boeing hid from pilots to save money. You'll hear about Sully Sullenberger, Pierre Cédric Bonin, and a researcher named Lisanne Bainbridge, who predicted all of it in 1983. By the end, you'll understand why 346 people are dead and why the pilots weren't really the problem. Here is what modern autopilot can do right now. A CAT 3B certified aircraft, the Airbus A330, the Boeing 777, can land itself in 75-meter runway visual range. Fog so thick, you can't see your own hand. The Boeing 777 carries 3 independent autopilot systems. The crew calls out, land 3, and the jet puts itself on the runway without a single human input. The flight management system handles departure, cruise, descent, and approach. The auto throttle manages every thrust change. Gate to gate, a modern airliner can theoretically fly itself. So here's the question. If the machine can do all of that, why do we still need 2 pilots? The answer isn't what you think. Automation handles the routine better than any human. Takeoff roll, cruise altitude, approach path, all of it managed by systems that don't get tired, don't get distracted, and don't suffer hypoxia at altitude. The capability gap between a human and an autopilot, measured in normal operations, is close to 0. The machine wins on precision every time. The question isn't whether the machine can fly the plane. The question is, what happens when it can't? To understand that, you need 4 events. Air France 447, US Airways 1549, Asiana 214, Lion Air 610. Each one is a different answer. Each one reveals a different crack in what we built. The official reason we still require 2 pilots is safety. The redundancy argument. A survey of 1,200 US adults found 84.8% would not fly a pilotless aircraft. Among 18 to 34-year-olds, the most tech-comfortable group, fewer than 20% said yes. Congress has since passed legislation formally requiring 2 pilots in commercial cockpits, citing safety and public confidence. The public trusts pilots. So the industry keeps pilots. That's the easy answer. Here is the darker truth. We kept pilots in the cockpit long enough after automation matured that we created a new kind of danger. Not too little technology, too much. We trained pilots to manage systems they barely understood. In aircraft, they rarely hand flew, for emergencies they might face once in a career. When those emergencies came, some of them weren't ready. At 02:10:05 UTC on June 1st, 2009, the autopilot on Air France 447 disconnected. The pitot tubes, the sensors that measure airspeed, had iced over. Contradictory readings. The autopilot did exactly what it was designed to do. It handed control back to the humans. 3 seconds later, the autothrust also disengaged. The pilot flying was Pierre Cédric Bonin, 32 years old, 2,936 flight hours total, 807 on the A330. He had never been handed an aircraft like this in these conditions, by an autopilot that had just given up. Bonin pulled back on the side stick. The aircraft climbed to 38,000 feet and entered a full aerodynamic stall. The stall warnings sounded repeatedly, but because the angle of attack sensors were off scale, the system assumed the warnings were false and suppressed them. Captain Marc Dubois entered the cockpit approximately 1 minute and 45 seconds before impact. There was no time left. At 02:14:28 UTC, Air France 447 hit the Atlantic. Bonin's last words. "We're going to crash. This can't be true, but what's happening?" 228 people died. January 15th, 2009. LaGuardia Airport. 2 months before Air France 447, US Airways 1549 climbs out at 1527 Eastern. At 2,818 feet, the Airbus A330 flies through a flock of Canada geese. Both engines fail. Captain Chesley Sullenberger, Sully, has 19,663 total flight hours, 4,765 of them in the A320. The autopilot disconnects with the engine failure. Sully flies manually from that moment. He has 208 seconds, 3 minutes and 28 seconds to put 155 people somewhere survivable. He considers LaGuardia. He considers Teterboro. He picks the Hudson, not because an algorithm told him to, but because 42 years of pattern recognition told him every runway required more altitude than he had. At his NTSB hearing, Sully said, "For 42 years, I've been making small, regular deposits in this bank of experience, education, and training. And on January 15th, the balance was sufficient to make a one-time, non-recurring withdrawal. All 155 survived. The difference between Sully and Bonin isn't skill. Both were trained, professional aviators. The difference is what each had spent their career doing. One had built intuition by flying. The other had built intuition by watching machines fly." Lysanne Bainbridge published a paper in 1983 in the journal Automatica. She called it Ironies of Automation, her finding. The more advanced a control system is, the more crucial may be the contribution of the human operator. And further, when manual takeover is needed, there is likely to be something wrong with the process, so that unusual actions will be needed. She wrote that before fly-by-wire became standard. She had already mapped the trap. Earl Wiener, a professor at the University of Miami who collaborated with NASA Ames on cockpit design, coined the phrase, electronic cocoon. Pilots inside an automated aircraft, insulated from physical feedback, from airspeed felt through control pressure, become system managers, not aircraft flyers. July 6, 2013, San Francisco International, runway 28L, Asiana 214, a Boeing 777 on approach in clear conditions. It crosses the threshold at 106 knots. 34 knots slow, it hits the seawall, 3 passengers die. The NTSB found the pilot had an incorrect mental model of the autothrottle hold mode. He believed it was maintaining airspeed. It wasn't. NTSB Acting Chairman Chris Hart said the crew had over-relied on automated systems that they did not fully understand. The NTSB also cited complexities of the autothrottle and autopilot systems that were inadequately described in Boeing's documentation and Asiana's pilot training. Bainbridge predicted it. Asiana proved it. Now, we get to the one that was not a tragedy of circumstance. This one was a choice. MCAS, the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. Boeing designed it to correct a handling quirk of the 737 MAX caused by repositioned larger engines. It would automatically push the aircraft's nose down if it detected a high angle of attack. There was one flaw: a single angle of attack sensor fed MCAS. One sensor, no redundancy. If it failed, MCAS pushed the nose down anyway, repeatedly. Against pilot inputs. October 29, 2018. Lion Air 610 departs Jakarta. MCAS activates on a false reading. The crew fights it. MCAS resets, pushes again. The aircraft enters the Java Sea, 189 dead. Boeing had an AOA disagree alert, a warning that would tell pilots their sensors were giving conflicting readings. It was an optional add-on, approximately $80,000. Neither airline had purchased it. March 10, 2019. Ethiopian 302 departs Addis Ababa. MCAS activates 6 seconds after takeoff. The crew runs the Boeing emergency checklist, written without full knowledge of MCAS, because Boeing had concealed the system from pilot manuals to avoid triggering costly simulator training requirements. The first officer's last words: pitch up, pitch up, pitch up, while MCAS commanded the nose down. 157 more dead, 346 total. The FAA grounded the 737 MAX on March 13, 2019. It stayed grounded for 20 months. Boeing's DOJ criminal settlement, $2.5 billion. This wasn't automation failing. This was Boeing choosing profit over disclosure. And 346 people paid for that choice. So what are pilots actually for? Not crews. Not standard approach. Not textbook go-arounds. Automation handles all of that better than any human. Pilots are for January 15, 2009 on the Hudson. For the moment, the checklist runs out. For the situation nobody simulated because nobody imagined it, EASA knows this. Their EMCO SIPO project, funded under Horizon Europe 2021 to 2022, is studying reduced crew operations. The EMCO model would allow one pilot to fly solo during cruise while the other rests with ground-based monitoring support. EASA's requirement: the model must achieve at least a level of safety equivalent to today's two-pilot operations. Full single-pilot commercial operations remain a later-stage concept with no approved regulatory timeline. Some industry projections suggest cargo first deployment around 2027 to 2030. The future isn't driverless. It's one driver, better trained, better supported, who actually understands every system they're managing, including the ones that can fail. 4 crashes, 1 miracle, 1 researcher who mapped the trap 40 years ago. Air France 447. Pilots who hadn't hand-flown in years handed a crisis in the dark with no context for what the aircraft was doing. Asiana 214. Pilots who trusted a system they didn't understand. Lion Air and Ethiopian. Pilots who were never told the system existed. And Sully, a pilot whose 42 years of accumulated experience let him do in 208 seconds what no 2009 algorithm could. Every time we made flying safer, we made pilots worse at the one thing we still need them for. That's not an argument against automation. Automation has saved thousands of lives. The argument is for honesty about what we're building. When you remove a human from a system, the skill atrophies. When the skill atrophies and the system fails, people die. It's not a metaphor. It's a body count. It's 02-10-05 UTC, the Atlantic Ocean. The cockpit of Air France 447. The autopilot has just disconnected. Pierre Cédric Bonin is holding the side stick. His hands have barely touched the controls all night. The aircraft is in a full stall, descending at 10,000 feet per minute, and he is pulling back, because pulling back has always meant climb. He wasn't a bad pilot. He was the pilot that automation produced. Every time we made flying safer, we made pilots worse at the one thing we still need them for. At 02-14-28 UTC, the ocean. If you want to understand how Boeing got away with hiding MCAS from regulators, that story is even darker. It's the next video.